Welcome back to Buy or Buy. All right, today we're wrapping up what I'm calling the AMG Money Pit Trilogy. We've already looked at the E63 sedan and the GT63 four-door. And now it's time for the 5,000-pound SUV that uses the exact same, very expensive formula.
And wow, what a formula it is. I mean, Mercedes took a perfectly normal, luxurious GLE, ripped out its sensible engine, and just crammed in a hand-built 5.5-liter biturbo V8. If you get the S model, you're looking at 577 horsepower. It's an absurd amount of power for a family hauler.
You know, back when these were new, we were talking a six-figure super SUV. But today, well, thanks to some absolutely brutal depreciation, you can find them for the price of a really nice Toyota Sienna. And on paper, that looks like one of the best deals on the entire market.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Is this the ultimate performance bargain? A fire-breathing AMG for minivan money? Well, as we're about to find out, the price you pay to buy this thing, that's just the entry fee. The real cost comes later.
Okay, so how exactly does this bargain turn into such a burden? We're going to break it down. We'll start with the heart of the beast, which, ironically, is also its biggest liability, that M157 engine. Then we'll cover the drivetrain, the suspension, and consumables, do the ownership math, and finally give you the verdict. All right, first up, that engine. The GLE 63 uses the exact same M157 biturbo V8 that we covered in our E63 explainer. And if you happen to see that one, well, you already know this engine is bringing all of its very expensive baggage along for the ride. The number one issue, the headliner, is the oil cooler seal leak. See, there are these gaskets deep inside the V of the engine, and they just get baked by extreme heat until they fail. This causes oil to either pour out externally in huge puddles or, even worse, mix internally with your coolant. And let me be clear, this happens to basically every single M157 engine.
And fixing it? It's an absolute nightmare. To get to these cheap little rubber seals, a mechanic has to take off the entire intake manifold, all the turbo plumbing. It's a massive job. And as you can see, you're looking at an average bill of about $5,000 for this one single inevitable failure.
But oh, the M157's hit list doesn't stop there, not even close. That intense heat also cooks the valve cover gaskets, so they leak oil right onto the hot exhaust, giving you that lovely burning smell inside the cabin. The turbo oil lines also leak, which is a serious fire hazard. The turbo wastegates start to rattle, and because it's a direct injected engine, the intake valves get choked with carbon buildup, which requires a very expensive cleaning service to fix. So here's the crucial point. When you add everything up, the oil cooler seal, all those other leaks, the carbon cleaning, a new owner should realistically expect an annual budget somewhere in this range, and that's just to keep the engine from blowing itself up. So, the engine is a ticking financial time bomb, but what about the parts that have to handle all that insane power? Well, let's move on to the drivetrain, because we're going to find some more major weak points there too. This GLE 63 uses the older 7G-tronic Plus transmission. Now, on this specific SUV platform, it's got a really well-documented weakness, the conductor plate. You can think of this as the electronic brain inside the transmission, and when it starts to fail, your shifts become violent and jerky. Or maybe it won't shift at all, leaving you stranded.
And check out this 1-2 punch of repair costs. You know, fixing that conductor plate is already pretty expensive. But then you've got the 4MATIC all-wheel drive system's transfer case. The massive torque from that V8 literally stretches the internal chain over time, and that leads to another multi-$1,000 repair bill.
All right, next up, let's talk about the parts that are designed to wear out. And on a 5,000-pound performance SUV, believe me, they wear out very, very quickly. This is where that infamous AMG tax starts to get really painful. Here is a critical fact about this model. There is no escape. You cannot find a GLE 63 with simple, reliable steel springs. Every single one that left the factory came with Mercedes' complex Airmatic air suspension system. And don't get me wrong, it provides a fantastic cloud-like ride when it's working perfectly. But let me just ask a simple question. What eventually happens to every single complex air suspension system, no matter the car brand? You know the answer. They failed. The problem starts when the rubber air springs, or struts, develop tiny little leaks, and the rear ones are especially known to fail on the GLE. When they leak, the air compressor has to run non-stop to keep the car level, and eventually it just burns itself out. And as you can see from these numbers, replacing these parts one at a time is just shockingly expensive. Which brings us to this absolutely staggering number.
When your GLE 63 inevitably starts sagging overnight, you're not just replacing one part. You are staring down the barrel of a complete system refresh that can easily cost $8,000. This is not a possibility. It's a guaranteed future expense for every single one of these SUVs.
And that AMG tax just keeps on hitting you with the consumables. A full brake job with the standard brakes can cost as much as a decent used car. And if your GLE happens to have the optional carbon ceramic brakes, the replacement cost is simply catastrophic. We're talking upwards of $15,000. The massive tires cost a fortune and can be worn out in as little as 15,000 miles. Oh, and you'll be stopping for premium fuel constantly with its 15 mpg average.
So, we've looked at the engine, the drivetrain, the suspension. Now let's put it all together and do the actual scary ownership math.
Let's play this out with a really realistic scenario. You find a nice 2017 model for $40,000. In just your first 2 years, it is almost certain you'll be facing the oil cooler seal repair, a big Airmatic refresh, and that transmission conductor plate. Then you add in the required carbon cleaning, other common oil leaks, and just one set of new tires, and your total repair bill hits a breathtaking $18,000. Just let that sink in for a second. In only 24 months of ownership, you could very easily spend nearly half of what you paid for the car itself, just on common, well-known failures. And that's not even including routine stuff like oil changes or that brutal fuel bill. So we've laid out all the evidence. We've seen the catastrophic engine flaws, the fragile drivetrain, the guaranteed suspension failure, and the just astronomical running costs. It is time for the final verdict.
This is one of the clearest verdicts we have ever given on this channel. It is a definitive, unequivocal buy. The AMG tax on this luxury SUV is simply not worth paying. That depreciation looks so tempting, but it is a trap that will drain your bank account faster than the car drains its own fuel tank.
Which really leaves us with this final thought. The GLE 63 tries to be two completely different things at once, and it kind of fails at both. If you truly want a high-performance SUV, the BMW X5 M we've covered is mechanically simpler. And if what you really need is a reliable, comfortable luxury SUV, the Lexus GX460 we profiled is a much, much smarter choice. Do yourself a favor, don't pay the AMG tax.